Big hand for Liz. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Of course, just to make sure that it's not going to get really gross, this is about the imperial measurement of actually having a dozen. So this is about a lot of weeklies, basically. But I'm only going to talk about the modern weeklies, basically the ones that actually started since February 7, 2014, just after we got introduced MoreVM. And it was actually temporarily restarted by Timo. Thank you, Timo. And then temporarily taken over by me. And well, this is still temporarily going on. I tried to look up older versions of the weekly, but they seem to have disappeared in the mists of time. So on the one hand, well, I'll get back to that. So in early 2014, remember we had Rakudo Perl 6 with basically 3 functional backends. That was Parrot, that was the JVM, and the new one, MoreVM. And we always had one functional installer called Panda. So it was still very early on. The execution speed was even more suboptimal than it is now. We had actually bugs in one backend interfering with other backends. And we had severe inconsistencies in parameter and list and array handling that we needed to fix. We had async ops that were doing their stuff, but just not necessarily in any good way. We had no Unicode grapheme support yet, which is, I think, is one of the most important things that we have now. It's basically the best Unicode support in the world. And I'm not the only one saying that. And we didn't have any native variables yet. So it was really a new era. And we actually had a new URL for it. Perl6weekly.wordpress.com. Not running on anything Perl related, I understand, but it works. And it does, I guess this is what we always do with Perl. We use what we can, and it works. If it works, then works. So this is the place where you can actually get your weekly dose of Perl 6 news. So what has changed since we started doing this again? Well, I think we actually should look back a little bit and start at the beginning of this redone. Yes, Timo?
It's just P6 weekly without our the URL.
That's true.
It works. That's not. Oh, cool. Someone registered it. Very nice.
Does not live here, yeah, indeed.
Oh, good point. You didn't see that when you were... You just wanted to make a point, I get it. Anyway, Timo on 7th February 2014 posted this. Off we go. It's missing the weekly fix and at least temporarily pick it up again. So, and what does that? What did that produce? Well, the result so far is, for some reason, it takes a little while to calculate this. Quite a list of weeklies, 160 so far. Thank you. And thank you. So, what is this presentation about? It's actually just me going through the archives. Archives, okay. The weekly archives. And that was really a trip down memory lane for me. It was really hard to not get actually distracted and not have any presentation here at all. Just going, oh yeah, this is nice, and oh yeah, and that, okay. But so basically, I'm going to report back to you what I saw going through the weekly and some more. So I think I'm going to talk about features that you should know about in Rakudo Perl 6. And of course we had other diversions on the way. So how was this Perl 6 weekly different from before? Well, before it was basically just summarizing things that happened on the channel. We have logs of Perl 6 channel that go back to 2005. So if you really want to get into that, be my guest. But the new summaries were less about what people said, and they were actually more about what people were doing, as well on the channel as off channel. And it was generally, I think, more meta, less precise. It had more editing going on, basically, and it was a little bit more, and later much more PR oriented. Because, as it turns out, the Perl 6 Weekly is actually a very good place for people to be aware of Perl 6, even if they're not using Perl 6 yet. So the last old style Perl 6 Weekly that I could find was this one from May 2013. And you'll notice that it's just doing it for a single day. This is just one item in a list of 7. Each day, who did what. This is just way too much work. This is not going to work. This doesn't scale, and it's way too, I think, too direct. If you really want to get this type of information, you go to the archives. Sorry?
Slang started in May 2017.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll get back to that. So when I was going through this, I was reminded of cool features that I forgot about, and this is one of them. So we actually have something called, what is this called anyway?
Destructuring.
Destructuring. Okay, destructuring arguments. So I fill a hash here, and I iterate over the hash, get the key and the value, and then show it. So this will actually show this just. Why is that? Because if you just iterate over a hash, it will produce pairs. And pairs have a method called key and a method called value. So actually you name the variables here as the name of the method that you want to call on it. So this is actually the equivalent. Pairs, call the key method, alias that to $key, call the value method, alias that to value, and then call this. So this is a very easy way of, well, short way. Anyway, I had forgotten about that, and that particular string here made me realize that this is such a nice thing to have. I saw a lot of stuff like embedded projects, the V5 slang module, for instance. Unfortunately, it has completely bit-rotted by this time. And also the target, the Pumpkin Perl 5 syntax, has over the past year actually also evolved, because now we actually have sort of signatures in Perl 5. So, and that grammar didn't actually support that, any of that. So I think we might want to look at this again. Apparently Perlito Perl 5 has a grammar for parsing Perl 5, and it creates Java code out of that. So maybe we should have a look at that. So Flavio Block is the guy who's made that. So if you see that's a good thing to do, contact me or Flavio, and we'll work and see how we can pick this up again. Sometimes I got really sad because of absent friends. People have real lives. Imagine that. They go away, they do other stuff. Some people get married, others have children. He moves away and has children, I think. So there you go. But as we have a 100-year language, I'm pretty sure that we'll see them again in the next 96 years somewhere. So it's always good to remember that. And regularly, some of the people actually come back. So on the 3rd of March, actually, Larry Wall started actually writing code again for Perl 6, which is now over 3 years ago. He hasn't written a lot yet since then, but every now and then he comes in with this nice little touch, and where everybody's going like, huh? And it works. Of course, sometimes we actually have to revert it because it works so good that we can't actually have it right now. It's in there, it's in the Git repo, so we'll find it later. And then some projects take a little longer. So this is almost exactly 3 years. Here we thought we were going to get it, but it took another 3 years basically before we actually got it. And so this is something that happened at the Tool Chain Summit, and we actually managed to actually integrate that now. Sometimes I saw what I call VM tectonics, virtual machine tectonics. So in one weekly, it said the leading implementation, Rakudo JVM, and more was only passing like 99.5% of the spec tests. Only, yeah. And like 6 weeks later, Rakudo More is 100% spot, and JVM is now 99.27. It is down to 99%. Okay. We all know what happened with Parrot. It is no more. It has gone, and so we only have 2 backends really functional at the moment. If you want to know what the number of tests we have nowadays, we have about 67,000 tests, and this is how long it takes approximately on my machine.
Get a new machine.
Yeah. I just did last December.
Choose better.
But this one has this nice, oh well, I know.
Okay.
Sometimes you saw the birth of a subsystem like Spesh being introduced on the 7th of April 2014. You've all heard this earlier today about Spesh, specialization. So we also saw another birth of a subsystem called a JIT compiler. Bart is still working on that. It's production ready, almost. But we're getting really close now. So, and the nice thing about this is that it's going to be make it easy for other people to work on this. And this is very important because there's like a large mountain of work that needs to be done to basically create templates for certain situations so that we can actually JIT it and make things really fast. And yet another birth of a subsystem, the on-stack replacement, which was in June. Yay! Well, we still have that, I think, right?
Yeah, it got re-engineered recently, but yes.
Okay, we'll see. It's never too late to refactor, I guess. Anyway.
Well, it changed because we used to do the specializations on thread, and now another thread does them, so now it has to sync up, and yeah, it's fun.
Okay. Well, and sometimes we needed some time to actually figure out what it should be called or how it should work. So we had something called Winner for a while, which then became Earliest, and now it's actually just called React Whenever. I must say I like this a lot better than these two, so there's a good reason why we actually had that. Sometimes the weekly got really news to everybody that nobody knew before. Here Jonathan was actually revealed that he's been working on a profiler. Yay! This was in August 2014, and that Larry actually mentioned that Perl 6 is going to be launched for production use. It was also something we had sort of like a first news in the world on that. But we also saw some destruction, specifically with the destroy method that we got in Perl 6. But of course we're not doing destroy in an orderly fashion. So we're made too chaotic for that, I guess. I don't know. It's too hard to destroy things orderly. And if you look outside in the world when things get destroyed, there's some order to it, but generally not a lot. So it makes much more sense. And we have a lot of acronyms. This is another one. Yet another birth of a facility or feature, aka the DD sub that somebody made on October 2014. Oddly enough, this is not Perl 6. This is Rakudo only. There's no spec for it. There's no test for it. and every developer uses it. Yeah, I think it's very nice. It saves me a lot of typing instead of dd, and you can type say .perl. dd is shorter, and it gives actually more information. Sometimes we actually have a very important blog post. This is one by Moritz. Why is it so hard to write a compiler for Perl 6? And he actually, this is still, I read the whole blog post again, and it's a very good overview of what Jonathan earlier told this morning about why it is so hard to actually optimize stuff. But we have static versus dynamic, we have mutable grammars, we have meta-object programming, and now I realize that this slide is not correct. Okay. Watch carefully, it's going to disappear. Mixing of compilation and runtime, and serialization and repossession. And in general, we have general featureitis. Those are the points that he made in the blog post. I guess look it up again. It's very nice to see, and very nice in conjunction with Jonathan's talk today. But okay, the people doing the 6 Weekly, aka Timo and me, we're only human. And sometimes it is very hard to write a weekly. And for instance here, when we're doing the Great List Refactor, we lost a few weeks. It took a few weeks before we actually had a weekly again. And again, when the release came out in Christmas 2015, it took another 4 weeks before we had a weekly again. So I can only say that if we have big pushes like that, it is very exhausting. And so, sorry about that. However, having said that, if we look at the weeklies, we're pretty good at being really weekly since then. These are the ones that are skipped weeks, and those are the ones that are actually weekly. So I actually counted them, and we're like 50-50 now. 50% on time, and 50%, well, could be on time or not. So, how am I doing on time?
50-50?
Just about. Okay. So, what is the anatomy of a weekly? Who comes up with these titles? Anyway. We generally have something of a main article. Last week was, or this week I should say, was about Perl 6 going atomic. This is where the PR stuff comes in. I write these so that the first 2 paragraphs or so, or the first 2 lines, are something that looks good in a tweet or on Facebook. So when you look at it there, it sort of makes sense, and it entices people to actually come look at it. This is usually followed by some other core points, like this week we have a new guy doing releases. Yay! Because this is shit work. Especially if you have to do Windows.
PR. It's nice work. People like to do it. We need more of them.
We are looking for Windows volunteers.
Yes. Any Windows volunteers, please show yourselves. And we have some other core developments generally that are worth mentioning. This is not commit by commit. I mean, if somebody changes a space somewhere, I'm not going to mention it. If somebody changes an error message there somewhere that just makes it a little bit better, yeah, generally I don't let the people know about that. We also have something about events, like this time we had the Swiss Perl workshop, with the program in this case, and a follow-up for the Perl conference in Amsterdam. Then, generally we have something about other blog posts that we've seen in the past week. Then, I guess we have something I call the meanwhiles. The meanwhiles, like meanwhile on Twitter, an overview of tweets that are related to Perl 6. an overview of things that are happening on Stack Overflow related to Perl 6. And there's also a mailing list Perl 6 users, and some people prefer that. So we actually have something on that as well. I always, if there are new modules, and generally there are nowadays, I also list those as well. So these are new modules on the ecosystem, not just updates. These are new modules. This one is actually a result of a blog post about a review of Perl 6, and one of the things that was in there was that grammars, if they parse, it's fine, but if they don't parse, they don't tell you anything. And this is actually a reaction to that. If you load this module, your grammar will actually tell you where things went wrong. Now Larry came up with a solution to that as well, but for various reasons we cannot actually put that into the core just yet, before we figure out other stuff. So, how many people look at this? Well, the first 3 weeklies, I hope you can see the number, this is 174, 287, 177. You could argue it has a sort of steady following of people watching the weekly. If you compare that to the last 3, this is quite a lot more, about 800, about 800 again, and 4,000. What?
Amsterdam?
No.
No.
Internet.
No.
Cookies?
Sometimes when we do something in Perl 6, and it comes in the weekly, we strike a nerve. And we did that this week. No, it was about the atomic thing. So we have Reddit for Perl. This had 12 comments. We had a Reddit for Perl 6, which had 37 comments. And we had a Reddit for programming, which had 171 comments. I haven't read them all, but generally there are about, but I don't know how to type the atomic symbol.
That's it, yes.
And
That's all the comments.
Yeah.
that's basically it. And so, yeah, you could argue, but one of the arguments against that is mostly you look at code and don't write it. So if the few times that you actually have to use this, you can cut and paste if you want to, or you can use the ASCII versions, the Texas versions of the operators, which we also have, and it will just work just as nicely. So, how can you help the Perl 6 Weekly? By doing stuff. If you do stuff, we can actually report about it, so I have something to say in the Perl 6 Weekly. If you don't do stuff, I don't have anything to say, and there's no Perl 6 Weekly. Even better, blog about your stuff. Make it easier for me. I could just put a link in there. Yay. Very easy for me, and maybe a lot more for you, but at least you can get to say the way you want to say it, because if you don't, if you cannot blog about it yet, it would be nice if you could actually provide a 1-paragraph summary of what you did. 1 paragraph is something that I could put in the weekly, and so people will know about it. And otherwise, I have to write that paragraph, and I can only write that paragraph if I really get into it. And that may take a few hours, so you would help me out very much. How would you tell me that? Well, you can use email, RIC, text message, Telegram, whatever. This is Perl 6 speak for whatever, by the way.
Facebook.
Whatever. And of course, you can help by telling people about the Perl 6 Weekly. Because a lot of people still don't know about it. Well, maybe not in this room, but outside of this room, perhaps. So therefore we have social media. There's a Perl 6 Twitter channel. If you really want to keep up to date with Perl 6 stuff, every time if there's a new Perl 6 Weekly, there will actually be a tweet about it. So if you follow this channel, you will automatically find out when there's a new Perl 6 Weekly. There's always somebody who puts it there. Personally, I'm not on Twitter, so somebody does that. I'm not sure who does it, but I'm happy. And there's Facebook. Note, I'm also not on Facebook. But there's a Perl 6 public group, and it also contains a lot of news, and a link to the next Perl 6 Weekly. So if you're following Facebook, you will see it there as well. And that basically concludes my presentation for today about the Perl 6 Weekly. Do you have any questions? Yes.
How do you deal with vacations?
That's a good question. Well, there's two of us, fortunately. So I look at Timo and say, will you temporarily take over for me again?
From your temporary.
Yeah, well, that's how it goes. So that's how we deal with that. Now, if we're both on holiday, we haven't had that yet, but we'll figure it out.
But you don't want to write posts in advance for the publish date?
It's pretty hard to write posts in advance. I generally do collect blog posts that I see during the week. I basically just put them in a separate window and minimize it, and then when it's Monday I go through my gigantic list of minimized windows and then basically put them into the weekly. But in general, I don't know what it's going to be about, what the main article is going to be until it's Monday. And I can do parts of it, but yeah, people keep adding modules. So if I do this at the beginning of the week, I have to look at the end of the week anyway, because people might have added modules. So that's that. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you. I think I've optimized this talk so we actually are starting 5 minutes early into the break.
Yeah.